Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're dissecting the mind of a man literally forged in the fires of war, a man whose unique brand of darkness would go on to change American literature forever. We're diving into the life and work of Ambrose Bierce. And let me tell you, this is an author whose pen was as sharp as a bayonet. His whole cynical view of humanity, it was hammered into shape in the crucible of the American Civil War. Yeah, that's pretty chilling, right? This one line just gets right to the heart of what Bierce was all about. It's completely unflinching, it's got that hint of the supernatural, and it's just deeply unsettling. Consider it your first taste of a world where the line between life and death gets really, really blurry. To really understand Bierce, you have to get where his darkness came from. And it wasn't dreamed up in some quiet writer study. No way. It was forged, piece by piece, in the American Civil War. For him, you see, the war wasn't just a backdrop for his stories. It was the very ink he used to write them. And his service? Wow. It was a relentless tour of the war's absolute most violent engagements. He witnessed the carnage at Stones River, fought through that brutal Georgia offensive, and then it all came to a sudden, violent stop at Kennesaw Mountain. He took a bullet to the head. His own words, it broke his head like a walnut. I mean, can you imagine an injury like that, both physical and psychological? It's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. So if he went into the war holding on to any of those romantic notions of glory, the gallant army and the opportunity for distinction, well, they were completely shattered. That ideal was replaced by a much grimmer reality, the visceral animal terror of being hunted. He stopped seeing soldiers as heroes. To him, they were just prey. Listen to that dialogue. It's so cold, so sharp-edged. It doesn't even sound like fiction, does it? It sounds like a direct transmission from the battlefield. This is the kind of gallows humor that can only be born in a place where life is cheap and death is a constant, familiar presence. Okay, so after the war, what does Bierce do with all that disillusionment? He channels it into journalism, and he wields his wit like a weapon. His most famous work from this period, believe it or not, wasn't a story, but a dictionary, a book that set out to dismantle the English language and rebuild it with brutal, unflinching honesty. So, welcome to the Devil's Dictionary. This is a place where words get stripped of all their nice, comforting illusions. Let's take the word war. For Bierce, it wasn't some tragic breakdown of society, no. It was the inevitable, ugly consequence of the very things we do in peacetime. His contempt for human motivation is just on full display here. He saw the pursuit of greatness not as something noble, but as a foolish quest to be hated while you're alive and then made fun of by your friends after you're dead. Ouch. And you can bet that profound skepticism extended to things like religion. In his view, faith wasn't a virtue. It was the willful acceptance of the unproven, as told by the uninformed about the unbelievable. For Bierce, questioning everything was the only rational path. So you're getting the picture, right? No concept, however cherished, was safe from his cynical wit. Even beauty, in Bierce's eyes, wasn't some transcendent ideal. It was simply a form of power, a tool in the complex and often adversarial game of human relationships. All right, so let's put these pieces together. You have this worldview forged in war, refined in his dictionary, and it found its ultimate expression in his fiction. This is how Bierce became a true master of the macabre, writing horror stories that went far, far beyond simple campfire tales. Bierce was really a pioneer of a new kind of psychological terror. He had this theory that hauntings weren't necessarily spirits of the dead. Instead, he thought they were echoes of intense human emotion, rage, fear, sorrow, that get imprinted on a physical location, just waiting for a mind tuned to the right frequency to perceive them. And his stories are just filled with these stark, unforgettable images of death and decay. He never shied away from the physical reality of the grave, and he forced his readers to confront mortality in its rawest, most unsettling form. He just understood that true horror lies in the details. He could create this sense of primal dread by focusing on specific, unsettling imagery. It's not the presence of eyes that's scary, it's that malignant luster that truly terrifies. In a Bierce story, the greatest threat often comes from within. His characters are paralyzed by an inescapable terror that has very little to do with an external monster and everything to do with the unraveling of their own fragile psyche. So ultimately, the true horror in a Bierce story isn't a ghost or some creature, it's the breakdown of the human mind itself. The final monster his characters have to face is the shattering of their own sanity. And this brings us to the final riddle of Ambrose Bierce. When you piece together the soldier, the satirist, and the horror writer, what is the final, uncompromising worldview that emerges from it all? Well, his definitions, when you take them all together, they paint a pretty complete and unsparing picture. The legal system grinds you down. Marriage is just a power struggle. Religion is a fantasy for the ignorant. And humanity itself, we're a tragically self-unaware animal. It's a bleak vision for sure, but you gotta admit, it's a coherent one. So this is the real question his work leaves us with, isn't it? After witnessing the absolute horrors of war and dissecting human folly with that savage wit of his, what was Bierce's final word on the human condition? Perhaps this is his final answer. He rejects the whole idea of a grand plan entirely. For Bierce, destiny is nothing more than a convenient fiction. It's an authority for the powerful and an excuse for the weak. And that's his final, provocative challenge to us all, leaving us to question the stories we tell ourselves about our own lives.